This week on Startup Security Weekly, magical momentum of your startup, fostering online trust to build a community, leading with culture to build a successful startup, pivotal stories every startup leader should be able to tell, and so much more. So stay tuned. This is a Security Weekly production. Welcome, everyone, to Startup Security Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, and we're broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island on the lines via Skype from maybe we'll get a hurricane, maybe we won't, South Carolina, Mr. Michael Santarcangelo. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, man, I'm glad I'm here. I stuck it out for you, just for you.
Thanks, man. He didn't evacuate just so he could do the show.
Look, I got to be fair. If Jim Cantore was here, I'm out.
Oh, boy. So what's been going on? You know, we skipped a week, and I know we have a lot of things planned for the show, but if you want to update everyone, Michael, on some of the things that you've been doing and some of the things that they might see on the show.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, last week I had the chance to go up to New York City, and we got to do some straight talk work, some leadership stuff. But what I loved was I got to bring up this program in specific, and I, of course, invited more people to participate with us. But when I asked people, how many of you, you're security leaders in your practice, how many of you have this startup mindset? That fantastic conversation around that. And some had kind of embraced it already, and I was impressed with the conversation. And some went, oh, that's an interesting concept. We should do that. And I hope, of course, that's what we culture and foster here. But then what I started finding, too, is that there are some folks that are actively bringing startups in. They're evaluating them. They're supporting them. They're promoting them. They're connecting them to investors. And so I've asked them if they want to be part of the program at some point or we can interview them. And I recently, in the last week or so, asked people, hey, who do you want to see us talk to? So it's probably a good time. The vision that we have, but we've loved the feedback, and I think from our perspective, we're willing to shape this. I always look at it as like there's a triangle. You have the startups, and you're either a startup that is in security or you're a startup. And everything we talk about on every episode, there is no way you can be a startup today and not consider security at some level. But there are the people who are buying the startups, and although some startups are consumer-oriented, we're still talking about security, and security, for the most part, is going to continue to be an enterprise-style play. So if you're in the enterprise and you're the person who says, you know what, I get it. I want a different way. I need a better technology. I need to see what's out there that's helping me do my job better. I'd love to either hear from you, or we'd love to hear from you, or just tell us the companies that you're coming across that we like. And if you're a company and you've been going through it, tell you what, you can pitch us. Paul gets a lot of pitches. I get a lot of pitches. You can pitch both of us, and if it sounds like what you're doing is exciting, or there's some lesson in there to share, then I think we're at the point, Paul, where it's time to start bringing some other voices in and starting to use some of those experiences, right?
It'd be interesting to have people come on and give their pitch on the show. Is that what you want them to give their pitch on the show? Is that what you're alluding to?
You and I talked about that one time before, right?
Well, there's a whole startup podcast that actually does that, right? Like that's their thing.
Oh,
they're like the Shark Tank of podcasts.
Well, I don't want to rip them off, but I'll tell you what.
No, they do it like there's actually people who invest on the show, and then they come on and they do their pitch. So I think our show would kind of like get you ready if you were going to go do that. Like you would just pitch and we would just talk about it.
I think that'd be great. And
why not? Right?
No, look, and in fact, right, if you're listening to us now, let us know what you think of that, because, maybe we could then every now and then do like a panel of judges or something to talk about it or their experience. Dude, I love it. Anytime we can talk about the way we can improve our ability to communicate. In fact, right before we came on, you were telling me about some stuff happening in your niche. So what happened?
Yeah, so I was told that basically in the niche that we're in, like someone essentially threw in the towel. Obviously I don't want everyone to go try and research who that was. I'm trying to keep them as anonymous as possible. but this happens in startup land quite a bit. And the thing for me, knowing a little bit about the story, I thought their technology was great. They had a very similar approach to us, which is kind of scary in of itself. And I think it just comes down to ability to sell. And to me, this is something I feel like we can help people overcome to a certain extent, because I get upset when someone has really awesome technology, but throws in the towel or has to fold because they can't sell it, right?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because one of the things I was going to point out, and I think you've heard me say this on this program and on Security Weekly, and I've written about it. You can have the best tech in the world if you can't communicate, if you cannot translate that to somebody else, and you can't demonstrate the value. I'll tell you something. In fact, we'll update our journeys later, but one of the things that I'm going to do, and it's funny, I did this with trepidation, and now that I've committed to it, I can't wait. I've been building for years a bunch of materials around value and other types of things, and I'm going to make some of them on my website absolutely free, probably in the next week or so, to get it all up the way that I want it to. But the point to that is there's a way that you can negotiate out your value and explain it to just about anybody. What I always tell folks is, if you're going to bring me a new product now, I mean, you and I have been in this long enough. It used to be, what are you going to rip out, right? It's a rip and replace. We're past that stage. But now what I understand is, what's the value? How do you make my life better? How do you help me advance my goals? There's a lot of depth around that, but I'm going to tell you the one thing that I always look at for somebody. If you're coming into my environment, what I'd like to see is what I call a net positive value in 90 days. So what I mean by that is, if I've invested $50,000 into your solution, 90 days from now, I'd like to calibrate that I've got $50,000 of value from it. It's not a return on investment. It's not an internal rate of return. It's none of those things. It's really just using the calculation of value to say, was this worth it for me in about 90 days or not? But in the first year, I'd like to see a 3 to 5 time increase in value relative to what I invested. So if I invested $50,000, at the end of the year, I need to be able to measure and come back and say, wow, it was great. I'm really glad, Paul, that I went with your solution. I put it in because it has now generated 3 to 5 times better than what I was doing. If you're in security today, that's the argument you need to be able to make. You need to be able to capture the value, look at the measurement on how to do that. So that's one of the other things, Paul, that we can do. We can help people look at that. I'm going to make the tools, the high-level stuff, it's going to be absolutely free. People can have it. Happy to explore that with people. But, as I've been kind of processing your story, that's what I look at. They could be a better tech, but if they can't tell that story.
And so here's the thing. I've seen a couple of different approaches, and I'm curious your feedback, Michael, and our listeners' feedback on this one. And here's what I really believe today. I think a smaller startup that is just selling their product, so they're giving a sales pitch, and then you have to buy it, or maybe even you try it, and they're small, they haven't taken any funding. I think that's the hardest path, to be honest with you. I think your success rate is gonna struggle in that model. So a couple of other paths that I see is that you can take funding, and then you can take that model and you can grow it, because you can grow staff, you can train your staff, and then you can get people to implement it and try it. But you need funding to do that. You need people, right, to go do that, to get people into your product, get the product into places, improve the value. Or you can do what we did, which turns out to be one of the best decisions that I think we ever made. And that is, you can give a portion of your product away for free. And it turns out, for a lot of reasons, that has just, like, we're stepping up levels on that premise of giving something away for free. So we've taken our sensor portion and we basically said it's free.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it.
And so that lets people try it. I don't know. It does these, like, magical things, right? You don't want to end up in a situation where you're like, well, we can't sell it, so we gotta throw in the towel. If you give it away for free, it's really weird. It's like people are more inclined to look at the commercial product. It has almost like the opposite effect. I don't understand the sociology behind it, but I think just the sheer premise of you giving something away instills buyer confidence, which is just bizarre, but it does.
because it's one of the things we'll talk about when we get to the news stories, but I'll tell you what I've been learning about it, because I keep looking at that myself. It's a transparency equals trust. It equals that level of engagement, and that level of transparency that here, try it for yourself. Now, the trick to walk, and I'll just be blunt about it, and sometimes I try to get artsy, but what you want to do when you're doing something like that, you're giving something away for free, is you want to make it useful enough that you're leading with value, and that the person who uses it gets value from it. But then you want to help them also understand that, wow, this really sucks, the situation, not your solution. And if I paid for more, man, I could really get some stuff down. I'll tell you, it's a fine line to figure it out. And that's where I said, I was a little hesitant to give some of this stuff away for free. But then as I've watched people interact with it over the last couple of weeks, I'm like, I have to give it away for free because I'll get better as a result. There's deeper things we can do. I had stuff in the course where I realized if I had given that away for free ahead of time, now I can go deeper. Now we can do more. Now more people will benefit from it. Okay, let's jump in and do that. So I think it's a smart strategy. I would say I think there's a third strategy, which is, and I'm starting to see some of this too. And in fact, I think you guys pattern this a little bit. You know how to run a consulting organization, so you can still get in the field and help people solve problems. And in the act of solving those problems, you developed your product because maybe initially it helped you, and then you can start to teach them how it helps them. But you have a revenue stream, and it still gives you those stories. You can come back and say, let me show you. Here's an example of how this works, and we just did this with a client. Oh, so you're actually using this in the field. People like me, okay, I'm less scared to work with you.
Yeah, it does make people less scared. I tend to find that if you hinge on, it's just one small component. If you hinge on that, it's still, what I think customers see is, oh, so if you come to my organization and you help me set it up, like it can work, but we want to get to a point, and then a lot of customers want to get to the point where they can just buy it and start using it. And if the only way you have it now is like your hand holding, that can actually work in the opposite realm.
Exactly.
But it is a positive because
really fast. Yeah.
We're like, yes, it does work. And here's, we have made it work with the services end, but you got to get to the next level and make it work without and just deliver. So
now I think there's a subtlety to this too, and I like the way that it seems that you've handled that news, right? Because you get the news of somebody that you see as a competitor or somebody else who's in that space, and they exit the space. I think it's easy to say, "Whoa, what are we doing? Is that going to happen to us?" Yeah. And by the way, I think that's probably a fair analysis. But if you come back and say, "Look, they had a good technology. They didn't really know how to explain it. They kept it all bottled up tight. There was a lot of handling." I think there's lessons that you can learn from that. When we look at startups, one of the questions I ask new startups is how, not your why story, but how. How did you come to that? They go, oh, well, and it's like we talk about with Shark Tank all the time, so we've checked that box for this episode. If you come in and you tell me there's, 7 billion people in the world and that's your whole market, stop, go away. And so if you're saying to me, well, we can help everybody and it's going to be great for everybody and there's so much, no. How did you get to this specific problem? So what I also like about it is you guys have hands-on experience solving exactly this problem. You're developing the technologies that both benefit you and that will benefit other people in the same types of situations. So you didn't look at it and say, I don't think you said, okay, well, we should give up too. You're just like, let me go learn from them and figure out how to be better, right?
Yeah, and it kind of reaffirms some of our other decisions. And I don't know exactly how everyone else does it in the industry in the specific niche that we're in, right? But I know that we also made the decision about interoperability. We want to work with specific technologies. And I tell you what, this is kind of a side note, but I was amazed at how many enterprises and security teams that are protecting high-value targets are using and relying on open source software for network monitoring. And that's the software we operate with Bro, but we open source network and security monitoring software. I was like, wow, there's a lot of people. I did the stats, right? I'm like, there's a lot of people using it. And then we're on the phone with clients. More often than not, they're like, yeah, I already use that in my environment. And we're like, great, use that. You don't have to pay us for any of that stuff. It's free. You build the hardware. You collect the data. I'm like, send that data to us, and we'll help you analyze it. And so we were interoperating with, open source software, and it lowers the barrier to entry. And I think it's nice because it's like, we're giving something away for free, but we're not, right? Like it's operating with free stuff.
It feels kind of like if you're using Google, they just changed it. It's not Google Apps anymore or Google for I don't know. It's got Google Suite, I think is what they call it. But like
something like that, yeah.
If there's some solution that says, hey, by the way, you can install this in your Chrome browser and we'll integrate seamlessly with the Google Apps. And then you go and you look at it and you go, well, they got at least 4 stars or X number of reviews. It seems kind of cool. And it's a free try. Okay. I'm much more inclined to click that button.
Right.
Yeah, and I get it, right? We're in security. We're supposed to read all sorts of other stuff. Just assume I do or I don't. It doesn't particularly matter. What we're talking about is if you're already in an environment where you're comfortable using something and you go, yeah, first of all, what I heard from you was I'm going to validate your decision. I'm going to show you how I can help you get more out of that. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to cost you anything extra for what you already have. Mm-hmm. Paul, that's a winning recipe. That's fantastic.
So that's where we're at now.
Fantastic. That's what we should just. Paul is fantastic.
We're just, we're it's exciting. We're gaining some more traction, which is nice, and I think we're making some good decisions on that front, and we're also learning as we go as well. I think anyone that claims they have it all figured out when they have a startup is probably lying, or maybe the smartest person in the world, one of the two.
yeah, they're not the most interesting person. They're the most smartest person in the world. I've met people that have been through this cycle 5, 6, 10 times. They learn something new every time, mm-hmm. and at least the ones that keep doing it successfully do. That leads me to, one of the things I always enjoy is if somebody's got a situation that they're in, we've already talked to people about kind of how to get themselves started or how to get themselves unstuck. Shoot us whatever you're working on. But that works if you're in the enterprise. If you can adopt this startup mindset and bring this to your work in the enterprise, I think they call it entrepreneurial. Yeah, fine. Call it whatever you want. But if you got a challenge, bring it to us. We'll help you figure it out. Or at least admit we don't know.
It's really true, Michael. There is like you're figuring out how to solve problems for other people and sell them a product. And internally, like you got to kind of do the same thing, right?
That's exactly right.
Not even kind of the same, but it's like the same thing. Now you got me thinking like when I worked for organizations, when I would propose solutions, I mean, it was the same kind of pitch that has to happen. So,
I've said for years, if we'll just do a little crossover on this, because sometimes we will talk about leadership here, right? So I did communication for years, and I'm still, and I probably have to stop saying this, but I got dragged into the leadership stuff. And I think the reason I keep explaining that is it wasn't like I woke up one day and beat my chest and said, check me out, I'm the leader, follow me. I don't think it's that way. But I've studied leadership and how to elevate people and how to do stuff differently. And that's exactly the same mindset. Look, you can't be in security today and not appreciate that you have an opportunity to sell. You can't be in security today and understand that you have an opportunity to disrupt, but disrupt by bringing stuff together, not being a jerk and saying no. So if you're a startup today, you need to be paying attention to leadership. If you're in an organization today, you can adopt a startup-like mentality. Focus on less, do it better, provide amazing customer support, build up a sense of culture. We got some pretty good stories this week that if you're yet not at that startup stage, you've got that idea, you want to do it, I'll tell you what, I challenge you, listen to these stories and then say, could I apply this with where I am today? And if the answer is no, hit us up on Twitter or drop us a note and let us know why, because I'll be shocked.
And with that, I think it's time to take a break and transition into our fabulous stories for this week, Michael. We've got several to talk about, and I always love talking about the stories here on Startup because they're so different from every other show and a lot of fun. So make sure you stay tuned because we're coming right back to talk about startup stories.